Okay. Well, hi everyone. I'm Robert. I'm with the Waterbury Symphony Orchestra, and I want to thank the Silas Bronson Library for having us here today. They're a great partner. I wish we could be together in person, but that's not possible because of the circumstances. But I think it's great that we're able to bring these programs to you virtually. So I just want to again thank the Silas Bronson Library, and I think you're in for a real treat with today's musical story. I'd like to introduce my colleague, Amy Jones, and we also have our artist from the Waterbury Symphony Orchestra, Ed Allman, and they're going to tell you a great story through music today. So enjoy. Thank you.
Splash screen, that's cool. All right, well, good morning. I don't know how many of you are out there since I unfortunately can't see you today, but as Robert said, my name is Ed. I'm a musician with the Waterbury Symphony, and the instrument I play is this big thing here that I hope you all can get a pretty good view of. I'll move around a little bit so it's a little more in the camera. As you can see, it's taller than I am, and this instrument is called the double bass. The double bass is a member of the string family. So you see it has 1, 2, 3, 4 really long metal strings, and that's how it makes sound. You make the strings move, the sound goes through a wooden piece down here into the body, which is hollow. So as big as it is, it's not very heavy. People always ask, oh, how do you carry that? And it is heavy, but it's not as heavy as you'd think because it's hollow. The sound bounces out of the hollow body like a loudspeaker. It acts like an amplifier like you might have at home. Now, even though it does have strings like a violin or a cello or a viola, if you've ever seen those instruments or heard them, and even though it is sometimes called the bass violin or the bowl fiddle, it's actually not the same instrument big family. It's a member of the string family, but it's actually much more like a guitar than it is like a violin. It's tuned differently, and the older version of this instrument used to have frets up here like a guitar and might have 5 or even 6 strings. So that's one of those little bits of trivia. When someone says a bass is a member of the violin family, you can say, nuh-uh, Mr. Ed told me different. It's not. It's actually more like a guitar. Like every other string instrument, there are a couple of ways you can play it. The one that a lot of people are familiar with bass, if you follow jazz or bluegrass or anything like that, is you pluck it with the fingers on your right hand, and that has a very fancy Italian name. That technique is called pizzicato, which kind of sounds something like you'd have for lunch, and it gives you a very upfront kind of thumpy sound in your face, sort of like that. So you're actually using your fingertips, so you've got to have fairly tough skin on your fingertips to pluck the strings without getting hurt. The other kind of cool way to play is we have this stick, which is called a bow because of the curve in it. And it's got hair on this side. And people always ask, is that real horsehair? Yes, this is real horsehair. It comes from a specific kind of horse from Western Asia that grows very, very long manes and very, very long tails. So they just basically give the horse a haircut. They don't hurt it at all. They just snip the manes and tails. And you can't see it, but the hair is very, very rough. If any of you have pet cats at home or a family have cats, you know, when a cat licks you, the tongue is very, very rough. It scrapes. This hair does the same sort of thing. So if it didn't have those rough surfaces on it, it would just kind of sound like that if you tried to play a note. But since it has the rough surfaces, it actually vibrates the string kind of like plucking it, and you get a sound out of it. One other little thing that people often are kind of surprised to learn is that despite this being a very big instrument, and you can usually tell how high or low an instrument by how big or how small it is. The bigger the instrument, the longer it is, the lower the notes it's going to play. And if it's a much smaller instrument, like a flute or a violin, the much higher notes it's going to play because the vibrations are very small, very short. Despite the bass being really big, I mean, I suspect there are some people out there in my audience who could literally fit inside this instrument. It's actually very soft. It's the softest instrument that you will usually see in an orchestra. And that's because for all its size, the body actually isn't big enough for it to make a lot of noise. For it to be big enough to be as loud as a violin or a cello, this part of the bass would have to be about up here, and nobody could really play it. It would just be immensely huge and impossible to play. So if you're used to like listening to rock bands or going to club shows where you hear a very loud bass, that's because it's amplified. If you didn't have a microphone or a pickup on that, you'd never hear it over keyboards, over a drummer, over saxophone. It's really very, very quiet instrument. So very big instrument, kind of a quiet instrument. So we have these two extremes. So why don't we tell a story about a very, very big person and a smaller kind of quiet person, maybe a little bit more like some of you in the audience. And of course, we all know what that story is, right? Very, very big person, very, very small person. We've got Jack, the giant, and in between is the Beanstalk. So we've got Jack and the Beanstalk for you today. And everybody knows how these stories always start, right? They all start, I can't hear you, but say it with me, once upon a time. So, once upon a time, when giants still stomped the land, a widow lived with her son, Jack. The widow was too sick to work, and one day, they ran out of money. "Son," Jack's mother said, "I'm too weak to take the cow to town. You must take her and sell her." Now Jack was brave and kind-hearted, but he didn't always use his head. So his mother told him to think carefully before selling the cow. Jack promised he would, but he was halfway to town when a man stopped him. "Jack," said the man, "I'll give you 5 magic beans for your cow." Jack thought. How could this stranger know my name? And how could he possibly know I'm selling the cow? He must have magic powers. That means the beans could be magic too. He traded the cow for the beans and went home, very pleased with the deal. His mother was not pleased. "You were tricked, you silly boy," she yelled. "There are no such thing as magic beans." Angrily, she threw the beans out the window. "Now we have no cow and no money," she said. "What shall we do?" The next morning, something tickled Jack's nose and woke him up. Surprised, Jack saw that a huge leaf was poked in the window. He pushed it away and peered outside. A thick beanstalk stretched up, up, up into the clouds. "They were magic beans," he whispered. Without waking his mother, Jack started climbing the beanstalk. His arms and legs started to ache. But he forgot all about that when he saw the castle. Jack knocked on the castle door. A giant woman opened it. "Who's there?" she asked, peering around. "I don't see so well, so speak up." Jack wasn't really sure that he wanted her to see him, but he was very hungry. "I'm down here," he said. "Do you have any work that I can do for food?" The giantess picked him up and plopped him down on a huge stone floor. "Start scrubbing," she said. Thud, thud, blood. "Hark!" said the woman. "It's my husband. Hide in the cupboard so he doesn't eat you." The giant came in, took one sniff, and said, and you all know what the giant says, right? "Fee, fi, fo, fum. I smell the blood of an Englishman. Be he alive or be he dead, I'll grind his bones to make my bread." "Don't be silly," his wife said. "You smell breakfast. Eat while it's hot." After breakfast, the giant opened his bags of gold. He began counting the pieces, but fell asleep after 135,091. Just a little gold would feed Mother and me for a long time, Jack thought. He grabbed a small bag and climbed quickly down the beanstalk. Jack's mother was delighted, but when she heard where Jack had gotten the gold, she hugged him tight. "Those giants robbed us of that gold and 2 other treasures," she said. "They killed your father. I grabbed you and escaped. Please promise you won't go back for more gold." Jack promised. But the next morning, he climbed the beanstalk again. "I promised I wouldn't go back for gold," he said. "But I didn't say I wouldn't go back for anything at all. After all, it was ours." Jack banged on the castle door. The giantess squinted her eyes and peered down at him again. "Are you the thief who was here yesterday?" she demanded. "I'm no thief," Jack said. "I'm a hard worker, though, and I expect to be paid for it." The giantess picked him up by the collar and plopped him down in front of a huge tub of dirty dishes. "Start washing," she ordered. Thud, thud, thud. "Hark!" said the giantess. "It's my husband. Hide in the cupboard so he doesn't eat you. Do the dishes later." The giant came in, took one sniff, and said, "Fee, fi, fo, fum. I smell the blood of an Englishman. Be he alive." "Yes, yes, yes," interrupted his wife. "You smell breakfast. Eat while it's hot." The giant grumbled, but he ate. Then he got a goose from a crate in the corner. He put the goose on the table and roared, "Lay!" The goose honked twice and walked back to its crate. On the table was a golden egg. The giant tossed it up and down like a ball, and his eyes began to hurt from looking at the shiny gold. So he shut them. As soon as the good giant fell asleep, Jack grabbed the goose and quickly slid down the beanstalk. His mother was waiting at the bottom. She was very angry with Jack. "I didn't exactly promise not to go up again," Jack explained. "You knew that you weren't supposed to," said his mother. "Go to your room." Jack knew that he shouldn't, but the next morning, before his mother woke, he climbed to the castle. Instead of banging on the door, he crawled in a kitchen window when the giantess wasn't looking. "The giant's wife hid me in the cupboard," Jack thought. "I'll hide somewhere else." So he climbed into the wash tub. Soon he heard thud, thud, thud. The giant came in, took one sniff, and said, "Fee, fi, fo, fum." "I smell you, certainly do," interrupted his wife. "That little thief probably sneaked in again. He always hides in the cupboard." But Jack wasn't there. The giant ate his breakfast. Then he got out a golden harp. "Play," he roared. The harp sounded like a sparkling stream, pouring over pebbles. The lady of the harp sang a song with no words. Jack was entranced. The music put the giant to sleep. Jack grabbed the harp, but he almost dropped it when it screamed, "Boss! Boss!" The giant woke up and thudded after Jack. Jack half scrambled, half slid down the beanstalk. "Mother!" he yelled. "Grab the axe!" Jack's mother saw the giant close behind Jack. She grabbed the axe and whacked the beanstalk. "Jump, Jack! Jump!" she hollered and whacked again. Jack jumped to the ground. He snatched the axe and whacked the stalk until it snapped into kaboom! The giant and the beanstalk hit the ground together. And that was the end of the giant. Jack, his mother, the goose, and the harp lived very happily ever after together. Except for the time that Jack went to town to buy a pig. But that's a different story. And there you have it. Jack wins. So what we're going to do now is if Miss Mary-Beth can field questions, if there's anybody in the audience who has questions about the story or about the instrument or anything, if you can pass them through her, I can try to answer them for you. Hey, welcome back.
Wonderful story. Thank you so much, Ed.
Thanks.
Does anybody have some questions for Ed about his amazing instrument?
Or about music in general, instruments in general? I can come up with an answer even if I have to make one up, trust me.
How long have you been playing that instrument?
That's actually a question I get a lot. I am actually somewhat older than I look. I am in my early 50s. I started playing piano when I was 6 with my mother. I started playing bass when I was 8. I was in 4th grade, and I think most of you can do at least a little bit of arithmetic and take 8 from 50 and figure out roughly how long I've been playing, but it's been a very long time. So.
Wow, was the response.
Oh, only 2 teachers and two children. Okay, cool. So yeah, I've been playing. I'm actually 52, so I've been playing for 44 years.
What other instruments do you like to play?
I like playing cello, which, if you don't know for sure, looks actually kind of like a bass, but it's smaller and you play sitting. I do still play a little bit of piano, but I'm not very good anymore because I spent a very long time without an instrument and I didn't practice. Miss Amy doesn't like me to say this, but I actually do play a little bit of viola, which is her instrument, but I'm not very good at all, so I don't do it in public. I play it kind of for fun. And I still sing occasionally. I sang quite a bit in high school and after high school. And that too, I'm kind of rusty, but I still very much like singing in the shower or in the car or places where people can't hear me. So.
Do you have a favorite song?
Oh, wow. I have many. I have many, and they change depending on my mood and the time of day. See, I'm kind of a classical geek. I mean, most of my work centers around classical music, but I also have done a lot of theater music, like Broadway type things. I've done a lot of church music. I did for a little while actually play in a band when I was in high school. I played electric bass. So, I mean, I like most sorts of music. So picking a single favorite on any given day is nearly impossible. So the answer is yes, but I can't tell you what it is today because I don't know yet.
I have another little question.
Yeah.
What is the difference between the cello and the double bass?
Okay. Now, this gets a little technical. The cello, violin, and viola historically all developed kind of at the same time. They're tuned in a similar manner, and if you look at them, they're shaped similarly. They're round up here and rounder at the bottom. This instrument is actually kind of pear-shaped. The original instrument that the bass developed from had 5 or 6 strings. It had rope frets and is tuned very differently. Violin is tuned, if you were going from top to bottom, E, A, D, G. Bass is exactly the opposite. Top to bottom is G, D, A, E. And then you'd have potentially a B and then possibly another string. So it's 4 steps between notes instead of 5 steps as it is for violin, viola, and cello. The bass is also interesting in that if there are any wind players around, it's the only string instrument that transposes, the only standard string instrument. It's called the double bass because when we play a line of music, the notes that come out are actually twice as low because these strings are so long that the notes are double the wavelength. So even though we very often play the same music as cellos in an orchestra, the notes are actually twice as deep as the cello.
Okay, but the mechanics are the same. It's just
Mechanically,
much lower.
it's much lower, and the spacing is much wider. And because it's so deep, some of the tricks that you can do on violin and viola don't work as well on bass. For example, the double stops I used for the Giant, they have kind of a grainy sound. It's because you're actually hearing other notes as part of the vibration of the string. So you don't get the clean sound that you get from a cello or a violin, unfortunately.
Okay. Kids listening, are there any other questions for Ed? Or Miss Holly, or our other guest?
I actually have a question for our small audience, and it's kind of a trick question. I like doing this one. Does anybody have a string instrument at home? And we very often get a lot of no's from this.
So any string instruments in anybody's home?
Guitar, violin, viola, cello. Got a ukulele? Okay, that counts. That counts. Ukulele is also slightly related to bass, except it's got double strings, so it's like a mandolin.
And a guitar.
Guitar. Okay, the reason this is a trick question is because everybody in the audience has got a string instrument built into their body, and it's your voice. Your voice works exactly the same way as one of these does, except you don't use a bow, obviously, that would be icky. And the strings are on the inside instead of on the outside. You have 2 strings in your throat. And when you try to speak or sing or yell, you push air past those strings and they vibrate just like these do. Your chest acts just like this big wood box to amplify the sound and send it out. So every one of you is a string player. I like doing that because everybody always goes, oh, wow, yeah. So, anything else?
Well, thank you so much for your time this morning. Thank you, Amy, showing us the book.
Thank you for having us.
I didn't get to this.
We will see you again very soon. Is it 2 weeks from now that you come again with another one?
Yes. Yep. That'll be Lee Karen and Max found, I had to look at which book. We have 2 percussion books. Max found 2 sticks.
Oh, cool. Okay.
So next Tuesday, I don't have it in front of me.
No, no, I think 2 weeks from today.
Okay, so 2 weeks, next
Thursday.
Thursday. So welcome back. Remember, mark it on your calendar so you could all come back.
Great. Well, thank you very much for having us.
Thanks very
Thank
much, Mary-Beth.
you.
Have
Everybody have a great day.
Thank
Stay
you.
safe.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye, Ed. Thanks.
Take care. Thanks. Always a pleasure.